In this video, you're going to be introduced to the concept of responsive design. For those of you who have taken ICT 375, 575, you were briefly introduced to responsive design in one of the case studies, but we're going to go into it in more depth so that you have a better understanding of where it comes from and why it is such a powerful way of looking at web design. When you think of the words responsive web design, what do you think it means? What do you think of? Do you think adaptable or flexible? What are some words that come to mind? We're going to go into more detail on what this is and what exactly responsive means. So why does responsive web design matter? In 2010, there were only 97, and I say only by comparison to what it is now. As a 2010, there were 97 unique screen resolutions. What that means is different sized laptops, desktop monitors, TVs, smartphones, because the first smartphone as we know it was the iPhone, and it was introduced in 2007. So it was still a pretty limited impact. The tablets that we see now, they weren't around, and they have really only come into their own in recent years. So there were 97 unique screen resolutions, and there were 800 million mobile internet users. And again, that's because at that point in time, smartphones had really only been around for about 3 years. By comparison, there were 1.4 billion desktop internet users. Now we jump ahead just a few years, and I apologize that this is still a few years old, but I had a hard time finding accurate and complete numbers that were newer than this. But as of 2013, so you can imagine what these numbers look like now, there were 232 unique screen resolutions. So see that jump, it more than doubled between 2010 and 2013. This is pretty impactful. Now we're looking at smartphones have been around for about 7 years at this point. The mobile users have gone from 800 million to 1.9 billion. That's a tremendous impact as to why screen size and screen resolution matters. And desktop users didn't change tremendously, went from 1.4 billion to 1.6 billion. But what it's saying is that there are still an awful lot of people who are using desktops, and interpret that what that means to you. I mean, that could be a full-blown desktop tower with a monitor, depending on the size of the monitor or monitors. It could be a laptop of multiple sizes, anywhere from like an 11-inch screen up to about a 17-inch screen, but they can then be plugged into monitors as well. So really think about what that means when you're talking about why responsive web design matters. So what happens, and the reason we like this is because prior to responsive web design, a lot of companies, especially larger ones, would have multiple websites. They might have an m.whatever.com as their mobile site. The problem was that had to be maintained separately, and they also had their main site. Well, that really only accommodated a couple of different screen sizes. Your standard browser window on, say, a desktop monitor or laptop monitor, and a smartphone. It didn't accommodate 232 plus unique screen resolutions. So what responsive design, as to why it was so revolutionary, is now companies who make use of it have one URL, so no www. something or an m. something, single control of content, meaning that the content only needs to be updated and input into one website versus 2 websites or possibly more. There is only one code, which is HTML5, and the introduction of CSS3 and media queries has made it so that they can be truly flexible and make changes and adjustments that respond to the different screen resolution. What makes a website responsive by comparison to just being flexible is the use of flexible grids, which means that instead of hard coding in things like pixels, it has moved to percentages. And font sizes have moved from pixels or points to ems, EM. In addition, there's flexible images that can then change sizes as the screen resolution changes. But those two things only take us so far. The biggest impact was when CSS3 came along with the introduction of media queries. Media queries allowed us to add different code for different screen resolutions to our CSS document. So the content is all the same within the HTML. The structure of our HTML is all the same, but now how that presentation and layout is affected can be controlled using media queries. So all of that being said, your new best friend is not the dog. Your new best friend is now a formula. This formula was introduced by Ethan Marcout, who's actually the one who coined the phrase responsive web design. And how you determine all of these changes to pixels to ems or pixels to percentages is you use this formula called target divided by context equals result. We are going to get lots of practice with this. But what it basically means, let's take an example. If you say that your context is 960 pixels, say the width of your website, say we're going to do that's your wrapper around your website is 960 pixels. That's your context. Now your target is, say you have a column layout and you have 3 columns and they're each 320 pixels wide. You would take 320 divided by 960 and that result is now your percentage. So let's go grab a calculator. So in this case, you can see this. Our context is 960. Our target, I said, is 320. So we're going to say 320 divided by 960. This tells us that it is basically 1/3 the size. But we have to remember we need this in percentages. So in order to get that percentage, we need to multiply by 100. So this is now what we would enter as our percentage as the result. So instead of saying 320 pixels, we're going to say 33 point, and then we have a series of 3s. The recommendation is, per Ethan Marcout, that you use as many of these numbers as your calculator shows. Take it out about 8 to 10 decimal places. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we could say 33.3 and have 12 threes following in that, and that is going to be the most accurate representation. I know that looks like a lot of numbers, but the further out this goes, the more minute or fractional those changes are based on the screen size. So this is going to become your new best friend. And like I say, we will be getting lots of practice and going into this more as we move through. In the second video, I'm actually going to introduce you to what media queries are and how we actually use them within the context of our website. And then after that, we're going to go through, probably in a third video, there will be instructions on that will help you with the lab. So there's exercise in kind of a practice site that you're going to use that will prepare you to complete the lab for this week.